Hello and welcome to the MacAdmins podcast. I'm your host today, Tom Bridge, a partner at Technolutionary LLC in Washington, D.C. I'm joined by Charles Edge. Charles, say hello.
Hello.
And Charles is the Professional Services Manager for Jamf Software in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Emily Koslik, thank you so much for joining us today. Emily, say hi.
Hi.
And you are an IT support engineer with Retail Me Not, correct?
Last I checked.
In lovely Austin, Texas.
That is true.
Where the barbecue is delicious. So I'm told.
I can't speak to that, but other people seem to think that that's the case.
That is true. And also Marcus Ransom, who's the, I believe your title has changed recently. Marcus, tell us who you are.
I'm the Professional Services Manager at Education Advantage here in Melbourne, Australia. Hi, everyone.
We're glad to have you here, even though it's I guess it's early morning there on the New Year's Eve.
It is. I haven't had coffee, so this could get interesting.
Well, we should get you a cup of hot coffee there in a minute. So,
Just make
and
sure
last
we
but
don't
not
hold
least,
him liable for anything that he says before coffee.
that's right. If there has been no coffee, it hasn't happened yet. So, and then also Pepijn Brienne, so say hello.
Hi, everyone.
And you're an R&D engineer at Duo Security in lovely Ann Arbor, Michigan, correct? Home of Zingerman's Deli.
That's right. All correct facts.
I am a person of gustatory delights, I'm afraid, and that is what I think about when I think about various cities. So 2016 is just about over, thank God, and we could not be more relieved to be rid of it. However, there's been a lot that we should talk about that's happened this year. Some things that have happened over the last 12 months that certainly bear some interesting, some interesting conversation. And the most important of those, at least in my humble opinion, is the development of this podcast. So this is the end of our first year. We started kind of putting things together in February. Charles, you want to talk a little bit more about how we got started?
Yeah. I mean, I have half the story. I don't know that I've heard the rest. But so you and I were in London speaking at Macaduck, and I cornered you in a bar, poured liquor down your throat, and then insisted on you doing this with me because I'd heard some stuff that you'd done previously. And then maybe a month later, Adam posted something on Twitter, and you can take it from there.
Well, sure. And he said, "Hey, do we have enough people to get another podcast started?" And we had some positive responses, and we kind of put together a working group and a Slack channel and start to figure things out and go from there. And this year we put together. This is our 19th episode in about 9 months of the year, and we're hoping to kind of ramp up the op tempo as we go through the next couple months. We've got some really interesting, or years too. But we can start the op tempo changes, in January and start to really kind of kick butt with resolutions and stuff like that. We've had some really great guests on from the first episode all the way through to last week, which is all available for download right now. And we'll get into a big thank you party as we go through a little bit further. We've had more than 28,000 episode downloads since we started. And I would say our regular listener numbers are somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 per episode, which is really, really awesome for a podcast that's, only about 9 months old. So thank you very much to the MacAdmins podcast audience. You guys have been amazing. You've been pushing us for new episodes all the time, pushing episode ideas toward us. And obviously the great place to do feedback for us is in that MacADM podcast channel on Slack, on the MacAdmins Slack. And if you haven't joined the wonderful MacAdmins Slack, there are more than 8,000 MacAdmins hanging out in that Slack on a daily basis. Maybe not all at once, but there are hundreds and hundreds of channels. There's something for every MacAdmin out there. So come check it out if you haven't already joined at macadmins.org. And thank you.
Well, they don't usually hang out in the rooms at once. I do think that they usually complain at once.
That is true. we have a very vocal group, and I appreciate that about the Mac admins community. Nobody's afraid to be heard, and I think that's a wonderful development for all of us.
I think we should definitely give some props to all the individual contributors, whether they have their names known or not known. But a lot of third parties have joined us. Some notable ones, I would say. We have Adobe reps. We have lots of Jamf reps, of course. We have Microsoft, smaller vendors as well who hang out. And I think, especially in the case of Microsoft, they have really listened to the people that are on the Slack and really taking it to heart, some of the things that individual folks have brought up, and us as a group in general. So big props to all the vendors who hang out and actively participate in the conversation and overall making the scene better. Much appreciated.
And it's been a great year for vendor interaction on Slack. And, certainly Paul Bowden and his team deserve a huge amount of credit for the changes that they've made to Office, especially with the admin community's responses. So, and also Carl Gibson, I know from Adobe, who are hoping to have join us in January on this podcast, has been very outspoken in the Adobe installs channel and the Adobe channel, trying to help out things as they go. So huge ups to the community for being open, and sometimes I feel like this could turn into a dog pile at any minute, and certainly the internet lends itself well to kind of dogpiling a vendor and say, hey, this is really terrible and we want to make it better. But the community has done a really great job in terms of dealing with complicated problems and in nuanced ways. So thanks so much for everybody for kind of working along that way. One of the other big things that kind of came out of 2016 was a nascent fight between Apple and the FBI. And, there was a huge incident in San Bernardino, California in February of this year. Sorry, it's not quite 2017 yet. And the issue there was an iPhone 5C. And the FBI really would like Apple to unlock that phone for them. And Apple has basically said, sorry, that doesn't work that way. But I think that it's set up a huge news story, especially that affects admins everywhere. And I was hoping we might be interested in going around the room in terms of talking about what you took away from the Apple FBI dispute this year. Charles, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that was probably one of the most impactful things that happen in technology. And it's not just that, it's the subsequent events of, hey, give us Alexa information from your Amazon Echo, et cetera. I think this concept of privacy of data in the cloud is going to be, especially with the new administration coming in, kind of a big deal this year.
Very much so. Marcus or Emily?
For me, it made me realize that unlike perhaps some other companies, privacy is very, very important to Apple. And where with other companies, there's often, allegations that there are backdoors everywhere that they can get in. Apple making it quite clear that security of your data is very important for them, and they want it to be very important for you, and that they were going to take a stand and not just roll over and do what they were told to do, but they'd also already put steps in place so that even if they wanted to get in, they couldn't. And I think that's a very admirable stand for a company to make, and all sorts of threats were made against them, and I imagine there's potentially going to be threats continuing to be made, and it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes, especially with a new administration, with a company wanting to take this kind of stand over personal security.
Definitely.
Didn't the FBI eventually hack the phone anyway? Am I misremembering that?
No, they did. And they used a zero-day exploit, from what I understand, that affected the very specific iPhone model that was in place here, because this is one of the pre-Touch ID phones that don't have a secure enclave. And so they were able to get data off of that using another party, but it wasn't Apple actually doing the data
Right.
attack for them.
Yeah, they paid
Right.
Celebrate, right?
Yeah,
paid
they
them-
paid Celebrate. Well, we think it was Celebrate. I don't think they've said who actually
Yeah,
the
it
vendor
was-
was.
I'm pretty sure it was Celebrate. I think they paid him like, what was it, 50K or something? Like, here, break this. It's kind of giving it to one of these, digital forensics companies that are out there that have all sorts of tricks up their sleeves, not limited to hardware hackery to get to them. But yeah, like you said, they were old. It was an old model, so it was easier to get into. Was it my turn? Sorry, am I speaking out
Yeah,
of turn?
no, please.
Oh,
Don't
okay.
jump in.
So the things that I've learned from it, two or threefold. I'll see how far I get. First is that if you have company-owned devices, you should definitely enroll them in MDM and definitely supervise them, so that if something like this happens, whether it's this dramatic or something else, you have access to the device. That thing was, I believe, enroll but never set up, something like that. Forget exactly where the failure happened, but they didn't go to all the way, so it made it a lot harder for this particular local government to do anything with the phone. Second, we've learned that what exactly it takes from the law enforcement side when you want to get into a piece of hardware that is encrypted somehow. If a tool is created, that all needs to be entered into evidence. Everyone needs to get the source code. Everyone needs to know what it's doing, so that the defense can see that there's no tomfoolery going around. Which also meant that Apple didn't want to create this tool, because that would basically submit into evidence a very detailed, basically rootkit, well, not rootkit, but I'm saying a set of tools to get into their hardware, and that's exactly what they didn't want. So in the end, it turns out you can just throw a little money at it, and someone else already has a solution. But Apple standing their ground and showing that their security that they roll out and that they're very serious about is serious to the point that they do not have any keys unless someone shows up with very angry words and says you must create this. But we now know what that would then mean for the long term, as far as like once you have a tool like that out there, everyone has access to it, and Apple would basically have to redo the whole thing if they want to continue to be able to say our devices are as secure as they were before we wrote this tool. So I guess that is what I learned.
Yeah,
I was also impressed by the fact that so many other cloud vendors kind of got behind Apple and backed their position on this. I do expect to see something about this in the Supreme Court in the next couple of years.
Yeah,
for sure.
well, also with now very recently the request for Alexa data for anything that anyone may have said to their little computer tower in the corner that tells them the weather. Turns out it may also be listening to them, trying to figure out exactly how much fertilizer and oil it'll take, and then you get flagged, like what's going on. So anyway, yes, I can see this going through the various courts to see exactly where what we do with all these devices, what chip or can they stay.
Yeah. And, it's going to be a very interesting next couple of years as we deal with the fallout from the election in the United States, as well as, different elections that have happened elsewhere in the world, and what Apple can and cannot be compelled to do. So it's going to be, it was an important year, and this was a hugely important story. But for the moment, I'm very happy with the way that Apple gives us at least an appearance of privacy in our own devices, as well as providing corporations the option to supervise their devices and basically say, hey, look, these are our devices, we manage them, and we get to control them, and we get to unlock them when they need to be unlocked. So this was a really big year for MDM in general. And I think that kind of takes us to one of our next topics, which was Mike Lynn's article from, I believe it was late May, MDM macOS. That has led to a number of episodes of this podcast, as well as some topics that are going, and that's some of the changes that are coming down the pike for managing Macs, generally speaking. And I think that that's going to be a big part of what we're going to be talking about for the next little bit. So does somebody want to do a quick sum up of the article? I'll dive on
No
that.
volunteers.
No volunteers.
Sorry.
That's okay. It was going to give me a second to just pull it up here. But Mike wrote a really interesting article on his blog And he's very clear to say, hey, look, this is only a personal fictitious thought experiment. This is certainly not the words of the corporation for which he works. But one of the takeaways that we've had from WWDC this year is that MDM is coming to the Mac in a way that may have significant consequences for the way in which we manage our Macs. And it's totally okay for Mac admins to start talking about this because of the way in which Apple has changed the licensing of data and the way that your NDA applies to stuff that's been disclosed at WWDC. And a big part of that is focused around the APFS file system that's coming now with toward the 2017 timeframe, likely to be released as part of whatever next version of the OS is out there as a bootable operating system. And it's intended to be, as Apple says, the default file system for all Apple products in 2017, whether that's an iPhone, whether that's a MacBook Pro with Touch Bar, or whether that's an iMac. And it's essentially designed to be an in-place upgrade from HFS Plus, which the current file system is. And we'll make sure the show notes have this article as well as Rich Troughton's talks on kind of the differences between APFS and HFS Plus. As well as some of the prior art that exists out there in the file system world. But the biggest parts of the file systems that exist on iOS and tvOS and watchOS that would be coming to the Mac would be that you can't use open source tools or third-party tools to install them. The OS itself is cryptographically signed in its entirety, and the OS is effectively separate from user content. So you have a bin that is your operating system and a bin that is your user data. And they are security features. And the whole point is I have a system that runs over here that cannot be co-opted or corrupted by third-party tools without essentially rendering the operating system unusable. But I also have a user data partition over here that exists out there, and that is stuff that I can do things with. And one of the other things that's supposed to be tied into APFS is a unified encryption story across all of their platforms, which means that there will be a native approach to encrypted file data. And that File Vault 2 will start to move away as part of core storage, but then we'll get a new version of encrypted data with the new APFS stuff. So how does this actually come back to MDMs, which is where we kind of came from? But what if /system and /library and /etc and /var were suddenly very protected spaces that we can't operate in at all, even though we're kind of sort of used to that, the way that SIP has operated. We've lost write access to a fair amount of /system, a fair amount of /library even. What if you couldn't change the ntpconf file, for example? That's the example that Mike uses in his article. What if you couldn't just tell your computer, oh, by the way, instead of talking to time.apple.com, talk to time.windows.com or time.mydomain.com, or pretendco, as Charles always puts it. What if that wasn't an option? And what if the only way that you could manage your Mac is through configuration profiles and tools like Jamf Pro, Jamf Now, the various MDMs that are out there, from Meraki Systems Manager to AirWatch to Iron. I'm of course flaking on some of the other ones, so somebody jump in and save me. But what if the only way to manage your Mac was through configuration profiles? And so this article kind of set us down the thought experiment of what if the way in which we're used to managing our Macs was not a way that we can manage Macs at all. So
yeah, I think it was good for Mike to kind of sum it all up, because there was a lot of discussion. I think a lot of it was on Slack through various grapevine echoes that some of us heard about how bad or how not bad it was going to get. I think that was a good way for him to sum it up and kind of have everyone talk about everything that was sort of, that we knew about it, and get some more feedback. And I think vendors jumped in a little bit too. I think there was at least one vendor who commented on the blog itself, and we heard a lot more in the following weeks through Slack as well, as far as where people you know, what problems they figured they would encounter if they can do certain things anymore, and especially the sort of the push to get people to open tickets with Apple through the various sources they have, if they have an enterprise support contract. Bring some of these things up now and start sort of rattling their chain a little bit to get some traction on this. Also, what you said, Tom, before about the secure OS being on the horizon, I would agree with that. That is a very I'm very excited about the outlook of that, because it will solve a lot of problems. Especially since this past week there was a conference in Germany, the 33rd edition of the Chaos Computer Club conference. Someone did a very nice talk and write-up about how the boot chain works on iOS, and as you watch that, you get a good idea of like, that's kind of where macOS sort of going, and it's a really good talk to kind of get a look at like what the future might bring, and where how things would hang together, and especially how that would impact us as admins. So I'll let someone else talk, but I'm very thankful to Mike for summing this all up and kind of giving us some some handles to kind of start thinking ourselves a little bit more.
Yep.
I was given a talk at Macworld back when that was still a thing, and I remember saying that the OSs were on the way to unification when and if the App Store came to the Mac, and of course that came and went, and people freaked out about it a little bit, and then it kind of died down, and now there's BPP, and it's just the way it works. I have a feeling that the same is going to be true with this. Who's got a toucan in the background?
I heard a bird too.
Yeah,
It's not
that's
just me.
Australia. Watch out for our wildlife; it can kill you.
Oh yeah, those little
Comes in
drop
through the windows,
koalas.
Drop
Your drop
bears.
bears, Marcus. But all in all, like I think it's just them trying to protect the OS and protect the users eventually. So it's hard to.
I think
it's hard
in-
to
I
really
think in-
fault it.
I think in line of the previous topic with the Apple versus FBI, that's really interesting to see them taking that direction, that they've made iOS as secure as they can, and someone's been looking over at the Macs and going, well, maybe we need to do something here as well, because we all know that there's a whole raft of tools every admin has at their disposal to get into a machine, as long as it's not encrypted with File Vault. And we all know that there's a whole bunch of their users that aren't encrypting their machines with File Vault. And, my view on this is that Apple's gone, well, we're going to do something about that, where if you're not going to protect your data, we're going to protect it for you, and we're going to make it, part of using this operating system, that it's everything's secure, and that people can't get in and do things we don't want them to do. The other interesting thing for me is that Apple are actively promoting the admin community to investigate this and to look at it and to raise issues that they have. Apple are traditionally very secretive in the way they deal with things. Things are documented. There are official channels for presenting information. But we're seeing Apple reaching out to the community and letting us know that this is happening and warning us, which also goes to show that this is going to be a big change. If Apple is saying to us, you need to really pay attention to the file system changes, then we need to pay attention to the file system changes and have a look at what that's going to mean for us. Rather than this just being sprung on us at WWDC and giving us a couple of months to deal with. We've had nearly 12 months of them sort of warming things up for a big change, and
Or 5 years.
Yeah,
Slowly moving in that direction. I have one final point on this one, which is the development cost. So if anyone can alter anything on the OS, then Apple has to take into account all these different potential variables when they're writing software. The less you can alter, the more that they know is going to be the way that they think it's going to be. And so it greatly reduces the cost of their development. to bring new features to the OS.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I agree with
hopefully
that.
we'll see a whole lot more stuff quickly, once they get things normalized to a point where it's not quote unquote open source made easy like it was when OS 10 first came out.
Especially once they start making their own CPUs. Rumor mill.
Right.
Well,
Yeah, I remember when iOS first became a thing, trying to manage iOS became a thing, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you can't manage iOS, you can't manage iOS." Whereas the reality was, as long as you knew how to manage iOS, managing iOS was pretty straightforward because there was the right way and there was the wrong way. And
I remember that first. I remember our first big deployment: 10,000 iPads with iTunes.
yeah, one iTunes account.
And that poor guy's Hotmail address got just hammered the first time it was a software update.
Oh man, that's a bad day. So I think that there's a lot that folks need to be paying attention to, and I think that WWDC this year is going to be more and more interesting than it's ever been, and it's certainly someplace where I'm starting to set aside maybe money and time to go this year, and that's as someone who hasn't been ever. It's whether or not they bring back the sysadmin track, which I'm kind of hoping they're going to think about doing this year. I mean, we can dream, right? I don't know if they're going to change something on this scale. You'd want to have people talking about it. And
Well,
according to some members of the community, there aren't going to be sysadmins anymore. So,
well, yeah, there will. They'll just be cheaper than us. But I really do think that we've got at least a couple more years before it's a purely agentless environment.
Sure.
So,
Yep.
It'll be a while.
Yeah. So that kind of takes us through MDN macOS. Let's see, what else was going down the pike this year?
You had
Yes.
Nomad next on the Google Doc.
I
In
did.
case the listeners are curious, we actually have a Google Doc for each episode. It's not as random as it might seem.
There's
It's
actually
just that our
promise.
nuts are random.
I promise we're serious about this, and we are serious people doing.
Wait,
serious
there's a Google Doc.
We don't tell
You're not
guys no.
helping, Marcus.
So
Yeah,
Emily,
yeah.
do you want to? You're probably the most frequent user. We're the first user of Nomad in the group. Do you want to take us through that?
Tom probably has more technical expertise in it than I do. But so back in June, I think it was June, maybe it was May, our Austin Apple Admins group had a meetup, and Joel rolled in because his True Source Labs is based out of South Austin. And he said, "Hey, what would you think about a meetup later this year where I talk about this tool I'm building that allows you to mimic binding behavior without actually binding the Mac," which was always a topic of conversation. Like, do we bind? Should we not bind? What are the benefits? What are the drawbacks? What issues does it cause? What's the user experience like? And so I was like, hell yeah, let me know when you're ready and we'll have a talk. And so I think in September was when he finally really started demoing it to like the public. I think people had been working on it previously to that. Basically, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, Nomad is in what you see, it's just a menu bar application, and it allows users to sign in to either a specified or a discovered domain controller to get a Kerberos ticket for account information. It has some nice built-in features for opening helper applications and service portals or BOMGAR and all this cool stuff. It helps install 509 X509 certificates. I don't know anything about certificates. Tom's nodding. That's what he's been using it for.
Sure. That's been our primary focus for a couple of our clients who use 802.1x networks that are based on not user credentials, but user certificates. And the really great part about Nomad is you install it, they have it's either tied to your individual login or it's a place where you can log in with a separate username, and it uses the Kerberos tickets to grab an a fully signed X509 cert for use with 802.1x. And so essentially we can, without having to heavily bind the Macs, we can deal with password authentication as well as certificate authentication for services that need it. And it's been a really good year for kind of dealing with those complex topics. And obviously, this is an alternative to Apple's Enterprise Connect project, which you can pay for from Apple if you have a large AD environment that needs that kind of thing. It's not inexpensive. I seem to remember we priced it out. It was a 4-digit number, but not a 5-digit number.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
pricing for that is you pay the professional services fee to have it set up in your environment and tested. And it's just that one flat time fee from
Right.
what I understand. So you're not paying per agent or client or anything like that.
Yeah, that's correct. And I do find, at least what we've seen is a lot of Jamf customers who end up using Nomad might end up moving on to Apple's Enterprise Connect. So it acts as kind of a little bit of a gateway drug for that.
Right.
I'm sure that's how
One of the
Joel,
challenges.
I'm sure that's how Joel intended it to be.
Yeah, I like to think
Right.
of Joel as a gateway drug in general. So
Well, one of the challenges with Enterprise Connect is it's only available in countries that have Apple professional services, and outside of Europe and America, where there are no countries, you can desperately want that product. At my old workplace, we were really interested in it, but it was no dice. Apple want those 2 days of their professional services engineers having a look at your Active Directory setup, going outside, throwing up into a bin, coming back, having a look at it again, going, really? That's how you've decided to set things up? And yeah, we looked at all sorts of different ways of getting access to it, and it was just not available. So Nomad is also filling a really nice gap there, where you might really want a product but aren't able to have it, and here it is. So Joel's not just a gateway drug, but also a substitute. I suppose a bit like methadone for Enterprise Connect.
Yeah, and it's worth pointing out, I think some organizations lean more towards Enterprise Connect because you get a certain amount of support from Apple, right, with using it, because it's an Apple product. Nomad initially was just like, oh, it's this open source tool. Some organizations are like, no, we really need support contracts. And then Joel came out and said, we're going to offer support contracts if you really want to use this in your environment. So they're kind of checking those boxes. Because I know for us, when I was bringing it up, they're like, well, it's open source. What do we do if we need help with it? And I go, well, I could just drive down the road because I know where Joel works, and I could just ask him. I mean, obviously,
And
not
brush him
every
over lunch.
organization is in Austin, unfortunately for them. But they seem to be, they're really vetting out all of the use cases they can think of in ways that will really benefit the organizations that would need to use the tool. I would love to play around with Enterprise Connect, but I'm not going to pay a professional services fee to find out that we don't really need to use it, or it's not fulfilling the things that we want. That kind of paywall is a little disheartening, but it's Apple, so I know they do. I think they do like go to meetings where they demo it, but it's really hard to find out when they are unless you're like really good buddies with people in the Apple professional services in your area. Some
I
people
always see
are,
them
some
come
people
by
aren't.
the Apple Connect channel on Slack. They have like, hey, we'll be running a new
Oh,
one
okay,
then
cool.
and then. But it's like 50 people that show up.
Right.
So that was a big
the
part.
idea of support is something that really made Enterprise Connect attractive to us. When there's some fantastic open source tools out there for helping deal with and manage AD, but there was always that feeling when the new operating system came out, and take a deep breath, work out what's going to break, and then hope that the community, the people who are looking after those tools, had the time to be able to resolve those issues. And they generally did, but you're sort of one massive change and someone getting busy at work away from oblivion in your organization. So knowing that there are tools that Nomad has a financial backing behind it, with customers that are paying for support. So that's going to it's not purely open source in that way, but that in a large organization where you could be having thousands of machines relying on this, support is important. Knowing that someone is going to take responsibility and is able to take responsibility for this working.
I think that the puppet model, I'll call it, of having open source tools that are fully functional, but also a complete, menu of commercial support works fine. I know Joel's employer has many. I mean, they do. What do they do? Like remote support, right? Like, like
Help
tech
desk
support.
services, managed services.
Right. So they're already set up for this stuff. So the fact that they have this tool and someone says, hey, I have on my desk a stack of money I would like to give you to support me using this thing, they're not going to say, keep stepping. We don't want your money. Obviously, they were a little easier for them to set up a system where you can give them money. But in general, I like have an open source component and offer paid support to make it run if you or your C-level superiors need that kind of security to get going. So good for them.
So, yeah. And it was definitely a great year to kind of to go places and meet people and see things and do things. And we had a whole ton of conferences this year. I started by going to Macaduck in London for their inaugural conference in February of this year, and I was hanging out with Charles there, as well as Joel Rennick was there, and that's the first time I'd seen Joel for, almost 10 years. And it was great to see him again.
Since he was a consultant, probably, before he went to
since he was a consultant, since he actually helped me.
Oh, yeah, because he was out of DC.
Yeah, he was out of DC, and he actually taught me a ton about Kerberos. And we hired him in to kind of like in the 10.2, 10.3 days to kind of go through, okay, how do we get single sign-on working for our organization? And then, when I left NCE in 2006 to get Technolutionary started, he was very generous with, as he was headed to Apple, he needed a place to put a couple of his long-term clients. So I thought it was great to see him back out of the fruit company again, doing interesting things. And Macaduck was great this year. My sincerest thanks to David Ackland and his crew at AMSYS for putting that on. They're up again this coming February. If you have not registered already, there's still plenty of time to do so. They've got a great venue this year at the O2 in London. And that's going to be a really interesting place to have a conference. Charles, you're going again this year?
Yeah, we should do we should do a live something, find maybe one review David, in the AMSYS crew.
For sure.
And
you're going to Pupine?
Yep. Yeah, I'm speaking on security things. So yeah, I'll be there for sure. It's a great conference. A little worried about filling a 50,000 people arena, but I can handle it. I'll bring some pyro. It'll be good.
It'll be great. And then after that, we kind of had a little break after February until we hit the summertime conferences, or the wintertime conference for those of you who went to XWorld in Sydney. We had Mac DevOps in Vancouver. I kind of back-to-back with Mac Deploy out of the University of Calgary. And that was a great event. That turned out really, really well. We had some really good speakers at Vancouver, including Clay Cavanis and Alistair Banks, and a bunch of other people talking about security-related operations style events. And Rich Troughton headed down to XWorld in Sydney, along with John Kitzmiller and a couple of other people. And you got to go to that one, correct, Marcus?
Yes, I spoke at that one as well. So, it's a little bit easier for me to get to than some of the other conferences, but I do try. That was great having Rich and Kitsy come out for that. It was a really good vibe at that conference, and there's a lot of interest in what's going to happen next year. So everybody put your proposals in to talk. Charles has been out previously. We're still recovering from that.
Sorry about that.
So what were your feelings from XWorld in Sydney?
I was trying to wave off the drop bears a lot, but other than that, it was great. I love the crowd, the organizers, the venue. That area of Sydney, it's kind of central and easy to get around everything else. I thought that the talks and the speakers were well well selected. I really liked hearing more about how you do things in the low bandwidth sides of the planet, so to speak.
Upload? What is this upload you talk about?
I mean, it really does. I remember the first year I spoke, or not first year, but the first year after MDM was released, or after VPP was released, when I spoke at the Mac sysadmin in Gothenburg. And I was talking about VPP for like 10 minutes, and finally someone was like, "We don't have that yet." You know, you kind of forget that other areas have different challenges, and I found that to be kind of one of my favorite things about that conference. That, and I got to surf in Australia for the first time. So
I have a really important question about Australia.
Yeah.
Do they have any regional Pokemon?
I
Because
don't
that
know.
might be a big motivation to
Yeah.
go down there.
I think those are
The answer is
indigenous in Australia.
yes. There's a Kangaskhan. Not that I know.
Of course,
anything
Charles
about
knows. But you haven't been down there yet since Pokemon Go came out, right? So you haven't caught it yet?
I do have one.
Oh my god.
One or two.
Oh,
Damn you,
No
Charles.
one is surprised.
no one is surprised, not even a little bit. You know, it's
No.
been nice. I'm here in California, and so I can get fire Pokemon, unlike when I'm in DC. So it's very nice.
That was the perk of my trip to New Mexico. It's just lots of fire and rock Pokemon everywhere. It was awesome.
Nice. So that kind of takes us halfway through the year, and follows up with three of the biggest events of the year: the Penn State Mac Admins Conference at the Pennsylvania State University at State College. And that was actually the organizers joined us for our very, very first episode of the podcast back in March of this year. And it was wonderful to see everybody. I only got to go for about a day and a half up at Penn State this year because work trips kind of kept me out a little bit earlier in the month. But it was great to be there. There was some really, really good, well thought of workshops put on this year, and I'm trying to remember exactly which one. There are a couple of different ones on hardware debugging and software debugging that were awesome. I remember I sat in a couple
Was
of
that
different.
was that the year of the peanut butter and jelly instruction lab or
That
whatever it
was
was?
year before last. That was
okay.
that was
I saw some
the
great pictures of that.
Yeah, the documentation session it was really great that year, and props to Vanessa and to Rich for putting that on, and demonstrating for people how important it is to be precise in your language, especially in your documentation, which may not be implemented by you. So that is the lesson to take forward from that. And then Charles, don't forget you're muted. But
I was about to say, since Rich has just switched jobs, I guess the people who are taking over his role are probably pretty stoked that he did all that work on documentation.
yeah,
I think he
so
said he actually had to write one additional document and one process he had not documented yet. So I think that's a pretty good
Slacker.
average. I know, right?
But will they look at his great documentation?
I
Or
think
just
they
call
will.
him.
I believe so.
But from what I
I think
understand,
they're looking at it now, I think, just flipping through pages going, oh.
man, that's got to be nice to come into a job like that where you've got the documentation on lock like that.
I think his follow up, whatever that word is, I can't words. The person taking his job is internal, so I think he already
Yes.
knew him. So they're probably pretty aware of Rich's document. Document first, middle, and last, and then document again what you just documented. So
document, and
Yeah,
that's right.
let's see. That also takes us to Mac Sysadmin in Sweden. Charles, I believe you were our ambassador up there.
As was Emily, yeah. Although
I
I
was
got the
actually-
Mr. Mime and she did not, I believe.
Yeah, I need to.
Not
If I
rubbing
go
it in.
again, I need to get one of those SIM card things so I don't run out of data so fast, and then I will catch
Yep.
mine. That was my problem.
I had that the year I was there. I didn't have an unlocked phone, and I was just basically looking for either open Wi-Fi, or as it turns out, Gothenburg is pretty well covered by the EDU Roam
Yeah.
Wi-Fi network. So at random places in the city where I didn't think I was going to get any signal, suddenly there was EDU Roam saving me from crazy cellular bill. So, but yeah, I have an unlocked phone now. Not that anyone cares.
And
Well, that was your
Tico did
first time at that was your first time at Maxis Admin, Emily?
Yeah, it was my first time in Sweden. It was great. Charles, it looks like he was about to say something though.
Oh, I thought that it was a great lineup and lots of awesome presentations. And I guess this upcoming year it'll be moving to a slightly larger venue, so I anticipate even more of those.
Yeah, I'm really excited for that this year.
I'm hoping for more lady or non-white dude speakers. We'll see how that goes. I know people have put in some interesting names for people they'd like to hear talk next year. I think that's just kind of a general challenge in conferences in our area.
Indeed.
Of getting some diversity up there on stage would be nice. Speaking from a woman's perspective, when I look at conference lineups and I just see a bunch of guys and I'm sure they're knowledgeable and they're great presenters, but it's nice to see someone that you can see yourself being up there on the stage. It makes you feel a little more comfortable there. So there were three or four women presenters, I think, at Maxis Admin. We'll see what next year looks like.
Let's mix it up some more.
It's not just on stage as well, and I think that also then translates to the audience. When you look around the audience and don't see an awful lot of diversity, it's something that needs to be addressed. And you look around the industry and don't see a lot of diversity. It's something that needs to be addressed. And giving diversity a platform is certainly a way of helping that.
Definitely.
For the Jamf conference, bringing us to the next one, I guess, we actually created a diversity scholarship. So we paid for people to come if they submitted stories, and Andrina led a great panel for that. But it was also first and foremost in our minds when we were planning who was speaking and planning speakers, to try to make sure that the crowd was kind of, the speakers were as diverse as possible.
Yeah.
I think that showed from going along to that conference. It was certainly not the experience that I got going to other conferences. There was a lot of diversity there, and it was really good to see. And Jamf should be applauded for making an effort there and doing what needs to be done.
Well, we actually have it kind of easy, but in that regard, because so many education customers, and there's just a lot more of a diverse pool in that industry than there seems to be in corporate America.
Well, I guess also once you have more and more of an international pool, I think you'll just have in general just a more diverse crowd. It's tough. Like if you're a small conference just getting started, it's going to be tougher to get that perfect the first time. But as you grow and kind of get the word out, and like you said, have a work group that actually works on it actively, and in general, like us putting the word out, let's if you're interested in speaking but you're not sure if it's your place, then it's definitely your place, and you should definitely submit a talk and and just get on stage and get started. That's really all it takes. So. And
I find I would be happy to do this at any conference as well, but I think it was Eric Dreyer who at Maxis Admin didn't want to take a spot because he wanted there to be someone who was, as Emily put it, not a white dude, So applause to some of that. I think the first person that I ever heard say something about diversity at conferences was actually Alistair Banks, who you mentioned earlier, and he had signed a petition or something of that nature that said he wouldn't attend or speak at any conferences that didn't have anyone who wasn't a white dude as a speaker. So it's gained. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was saying JNUC also demonstrates that it's not just a case of making tokenistic efforts, that there are really fantastic speakers out there that have got a lot to say, that it isn't just a whole bunch of white dudes that have all of the information. So for smaller conferences starting out, yeah, it's hard trying to get anybody in general up to speak. But if you try, there's some really interesting voices out there that should be heard.
Totally.
And I think it's important that we do try.
Yeah, I actually started not that long, I think, after Mac sysadmin, I started a diversity channel on the Mac admin Slack. So far, there aren't a ton of people in it, but we mostly share resources of other research and ideas that people have come up with about the interview process and language choices and just all sorts of stuff like that. So if you are interested in learning more about how you can contribute to efforts to diversify voices in our field and at your workplace and anywhere else, check out the diversity channel on the Mac admin Slack. It's at least a little bit of a place to start for some reading material. And I'll also say that if anyone needs any female speakers at conferences, you can let me know, because I'm sure I could come up with stuff to talk about.
And I will speak to the quality of Emily's talks. I watched part of your talk from Sweden. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I don't think people knew what to expect. I think when it was introduced, I think the idea was like, oh, she's going to talk about Photoshop. No, design thinking really doesn't have anything to do with the designers at your organization, although they probably adopt design thinking principles when they're doing their work. So
I think
you're interested about that.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I was going to say, and also not just about the speakers diversity, which is important, but also sort of topics of talks. Like as much as I enjoy going to conferences, like a lot of times I want to be there to hear something I've never heard before. Which is I like watching documentaries about things that I have no knowledge about. But if a documentary is done somewhat well, you learn a whole bunch of stuff about something you had no knowledge about before, but now you know a lot more about, and it's presented in a way that makes it so you take something away. So possibly focusing on getting, maybe going a little off track with, the same tech stuff, and, that's just very on the nose tech, and getting a little more, broadening everyone's horizons a little more. I think that will also help, and just getting, people who are particularly into so-and-so thing to actually step up and be like, hey, I definitely have something to say about that. I'll talk about it. So I think both things are important to just make it interesting to keep going to conferences. Really, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I noticed looking at. Oh, go ahead, Charles. I was going to pivot a little bit to MacTech because I remember looking at the lineup for that right after I attended Mac sysadmin, and I noticed that there was a woman on their selection, I don't know what they call it, their council, their people who decide who's going to speak, and some women speakers, quite a few, if I remember correctly, giving talks there. Did you attend that, Charles? Were you there?
I did. Nadine was also on the Mac World panel when the last year I was on it as well, but she's always done a great job of picking and helping to select amazing sessions. But I did find that to be a pretty diverse. It does have a lot more developer tracks. So if you're into writing things, in Swift or whatever, and I find that's just a more diverse pool as well. People who write apps. So it was a good conference, and Ed Marzak, who kind of does a lot of the recruitment of speakers for that, is very well connected and has a really good eye for what people are going to want to hear and see. At every single one of these conferences, we should mention that someone complained about the speakers. Either it was too technical. I mean, and there was at least one person complaining that they were too technical, and at least one person complaining that they weren't technical enough. So,
Can't make everyone happy.
And the Wi-Fi sucks, and the food is bad, and
well, the Wi-Fi always sucks. You got to bring your own, right?
Well, hey, I'll give MacTech some props, because I feel like theirs was the only network that I've ever been to for a conference where it held up the entire week. And I know that Jeanette Lee from Ruckus Wireless comes to actually tune that network every year, and that is her baby, and she does a damn fine job with it. And it seems to hold up to all of the abuse. So my props to the MacTech folks for having great Wi-Fi. I'm hoping to see some of that famous O2 Wi-Fi. I figure if the cell phone bandwidth providers has their name on the building, we should get some pretty good service, right? We'll see.
For the building, which they probably just paid a bunch of money to put their name on it. So I guess y'all will see in February.
Well, we'll see. That'll be the interesting part, I'm sure. And then there was also the ACES conference in Austin, which is not only geared toward consultant types. I was not able to attend this year, but heard a lot of good folks from the command control power guys on that particular one, and they had a couple of people on from the conference committee to talk about that. And they have several episodes of their podcast, which we'll make sure to get in the show notes with people who were at ACES this year.
I enjoyed it.
I was there.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right. I forgot that you were there, Charles.
Yeah, and Command Control Power actually recorded a live episode there as well, so
Mhm.
that was kind of cool. And I think I made some stupid comment at some point during that, but that's kind of what I do, right?
You never.
Right. I really I like the fact that conference came out of the ACN network and is very ACN centric still, but it's like by the people for the people, similar with Mac DevOps and a few others.
Mhm.
I think this year they're in Phoenix, right? Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah.
in June. Enjoy.
Yeah, that's a warm time of year to be in Phoenix.
That sounds like a great conference for sure. It's funny. Phoenix in June seems a little hot, but you're going to be inside listening to great talk, so it doesn't matter anyway.
They have good air conditioning. It'll be
That's
fine.
right. Yeah, for sure.
So that kind of takes us through the conference year. And by the way, the calls for presenters are now open for Penn State in 2017. So if you haven't yet, start thinking about what you want to present this coming summer. Get those together. If you want to talk to people that have presented there and say, hey, does this sound like something you should do there? Feel free to seek out any of us. We're more than happy to help you refine proposal topics, to champion your topics if necessary. And that's something that I know that I'm at least committed to doing for all the people. I really think that presenting a topic is about showing mastery, and there's no better way to be than to teach others. So if you're thinking about a proposal for this coming year, I'm definitely happy to help proofread. So.
Or another route, which is the route I always take, is pick something I know nothing about, and then make sure I have enough time to learn everything I can learn about it, and then put the presentation together like 2 days before I give it.
Yep.
Should
I
admit
also
that.
don't sleep on it. Hey, it turned out okay so far.
My approach is I pick a topic I think I know a lot about, and then I start on the presentation, and then about 2 days beforehand I change my mind and decide I know absolutely nothing about it, and everything I thought I knew was wrong.
Yeah.
Why do I keep doing this? Yeah. Or I
Technology
release
world
something or
changes
change
fast.
everything.
Right.
My brother-in-law is an HVAC technician, and it's very interesting. The union that he's part of, they have novices, they have apprentices, they have journeymen, but they have no masters. And so I'd asked him, I was like, so how is it that you don't have masters in HVAC technicians? He was like, well, it's not like plumbing where, we kind of feel like the art has been defined, and that there's really so much extra work that needs to that happens, that there's things constantly developing, that there's no one that has it fully mastered. And so I kind of feel like IT is very much the same way right now.
always trying to get to that mastery level.
That's right. So one of the things that we kind of had marked down as a section to talk about was the product of the year. Whether that's an AirPods, a TouchBook Pro, an iPhone 7 Plus camera with the dual camera system, the Lightning to 3.5 millimeter jack adapter.
That's
my favorite.
100.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
If the pick is based on how many think pieces have come up because of it, then that one probably wins.
Yeah.
And which one most surely spells Apple's doom? I think we should pick that one.
Of course, that one's very, very important. Am I the only one, though, who wants one that goes the other way, to go from Lightning to 3.5 millimeters so that I only have to carry one set of headphones?
Yeah.
I mean, because I got a brand new pair of earpods from Apple with my 7 Plus, but it's a Lightning end, and so I long since lost the 3.5 millimeter headset version.
Speaking of Tom, I can't help but notice the wires coming from your ears. Have you already lost your AirPods?
No, I have not. I did,
Okay,
however, left them plugged in on the charger stand before I got on the airplane. And so it was funny. I was halfway through the flight, and I'm like tearing apart my bag, and I'm like, I left them plugged in to charge. And yeah, I felt like a total goofus at that point. And yeah, that was embarrassing because my dad was out here in California. He's like, I totally want to play with these.
That's right. That's right.
Sorry, Dad.
Sorry. And of course, my MacBook didn't make it before I left, so we had to show off Tiff's MacBook Pro. So she got one of the 13s with the Touch Bar. So
does anyone else have the iPhone 7 Plus besides me?
Yes,
The Pine has one, right?
Yeah,
I
have one. Yep.
Man, that portrait mode is amazing, but you have to have really good lighting, or it looks like garbage. It's like either beautiful or terrible. There's no in between.
The ISO noise in there is just brutal. And you know, if the lighting's not amazing in there, it's not going to come out well in portrait mode at all.
Yeah, I played a little bit with not for portraits, but just taking a few like close-up shots, just playing around a little bit. It gets some really good, but yeah, the lighting is really important because if the light isn't quite right, either it'll just be like, sorry, can't do it, or it comes out real sketchy. But it's definitely something you kind of have to get used to.
Yep.
I really made a big fuss of getting one before I left for Sweden because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be back. I want to take really good pictures. Worth it.
Yep.
Worth it. It was really happy to have that.
Yeah, I was out at the marina at sunset last night. We were doing family photos and stuff like that while we have all of us in one place because that never happens. And I was just taking pictures of the harbor last night, and it looked like a Turner painting. Just the way that it captured the low light, the really soft dusk light out there. So yeah, count me in for a big fan of the iPhone 7 Plus camera.
Those of you that have it, do you think it's making it less and less likely that you'll have a sort of a more expensive camera when you've got something like that that's just in your pocket all the time?
It's definitely, for me, reduced the amount of times which I require to carry. If I'm going to go out and I'm going to really shoot, if I'm going to be serious about photography, quote unquote, I will take out my 5D Mark II and my good lenses and go to town. I do that probably way less than I used to because I feel like I get a good, very basic a good, very basic understanding, of good photography out of the iPhone camera itself. I feel like I get a good baseline on that.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's about it.
My story shorter. I haven't really owned like a full, I have a DSLR that I sometimes use, but it's bulky, so I've been using just iPhones in general just to take shots, and so this one is, of all those phones to take the majority of the pictures of, this one is definitely working out the best so far as the various modes and quality. So very happy with it, and the battery, because one of the other main reasons that I got the Plus is the bigger battery, because I cannot, without having an ugly dongle hanging off of it, listen to music and charge it. So I figured I'll make up for the reduced battery life by getting a bigger phone with more battery physically.
I haven't carried a camera in, probably since, what was my first iPhone, was the 3GS a thing, or am I making that up? I don't remember at this point. Whatever, iPhone 3, yeah. I mean, it's been that long. I don't bother. I just use my iPhone. Now, I don't really care a whole lot about having really good photos everywhere, but I have noticed my boyfriend does photo albums every year of pictures that we take. The quality went up quite a bit since at least the iPhone 6. It's probably going to be even better next year if I can talk him into getting a 7 Plus and we're both taking pictures with it, which is nice.
It's interesting that Apple often cops a lot of flack for people complaining about the camera in the iPhone, and I think this year they've really taken it to people, and it's 2017 is going to be, it'll be interesting to see where that camera goes. how they improve on it, and also does the really good camera then make it into all of the other models as well. I went for the 7 because I didn't really want the size of the 7 Plus. As soon as I started seeing the results from the cameras, I regretted that decision straight away. And I think next time I'll be paying a lot more attention to the camera. I didn't expect it to be as good as it seems that it is.
I think it was a really good
experience.
It was a really good way to incentivize people buying the bigger model phone and spending more money on it. I mean, it was smart on their part to go, no, well, if you want the dual lens, you're going to have to get the bigger phone. And I know that there are some like physical reasons for that, but it's just really smart on Apple's part to.
And they're still doing the 32 to 128 jump. That is a complete jack, in my opinion. But there you go. That's my product stratification.
Yeah.
So we got some interesting products out of Apple this year. I think personally, of all of the set, I'm most excited for what the AirPods mean. Simply because I don't necessarily love having the things in my ears, and things like that. And I just editing the podcast while I'm able to like set the laptop down, go refill the water glass. Because I mean, podcast editing itself is kind of the art of tuning, tuning little fiddly knobs and making sure that they came out okay. And you don't necessarily have to be staring at the fiddly screen while you're doing that. And so the idea that I can just set my laptop down and walk away, and keep listening to what I'm listening to, grab a glass of water, pick up the mail, that kind of thing, is really stellar. I would say that that's my product of the year. I hope that Apple's quick to get their lineup to speed to deliver. So, we'll see how it goes. Other folks, favorites?
I like the MacBook Pro, the TouchBook Pro, whatever we call it. Kind of in the same vein, Tom, as far as what it means for the future. The couple of new things that they're premiering in this thing, whether or not you think it's a terrible idea and it will bring Apple down. It is sort of the next move into what the future will bring, having a hybrid system with an additional processor on board, having Touch ID, having a secure Enclave processor, et cetera. It sets us up for the next, 5 years or so of product line innovations, and I guess it'll remain to be seen how much of the Mac product line will survive as far as like the Mac Mini and Mac Pro. But leaving that speculation aside, what it means for the Mac product line is that it is not getting left behind, and the iOS devices get all the good stuff and all the modern features that we have become used to. The Mac line is definitely being kept up to par. So I think, for me, that is the biggest product of the year as far as a long-term promise.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also interesting this is really just Apple showing us where they're going. This is just the start of it with the Secure Enclave and the Touch Bar. Like the Touch Bar for me isn't the most interesting part of that product, but okay, how is this going to develop over the years? How is this going to make it into desktop machines? How is this going to make it into machines with, wireless keyboards? This is the direction that things are going in. It's really interesting to see how Apple is approaching these problems.
Very definitely. I look forward to getting my hands on one of those new Touch ID machines, if only just to start to learn how to handle the different options that are present. So I should hopefully have it. I fly back tomorrow and go pick it up at the office. So yeah, and I think that there's a lot of interesting things coming down the pike. I'm really interested in the fast storage because there's a huge increase in storage speed that came with the new MacBook Pro. And
do you still have a lot of editorial customers?
We do have a fair amount of people that are spending their time in high throughput, whether that's video or whether that's internal creatives, spending time in the large scale, the Photoshops of the world, the big render shops. So we're interested to kind of get our hands on those. I think I have 9 of them lined up for replacement in the next 2 weeks. So that's going to be interesting to kind of see how that shakes down.
It brings another interesting challenge when you get one of these new machines. I haven't got one of those, one of the MacBook Pros, but I bought one of the MacBooks, and so I've had to become a citizen of Dongle City, like the rest of the people now, with USB-C. I've been trying to find some good USB-C docks. I'm putting it down to it being, still in its early days, and nothing's quite been released yet. So I have my little baggie that travels with me with, 9 or 10 different things that I need to plug in an external hard drive. I know that in a year or two, it'll be a different story, that pretty much everything you have will be native with USB-C or Thunderbolt 3 or whatever they want to call it. But what have everybody else's experience has been with their new machines and the entry into the world of USB-C?
I haven't owned this many dongles in a long time.
It's like SCSI all over again, isn't it?
Same.
Especially with the new phones. Now you need a dongle for your phone.
I can't charge my phone from my work laptop because I can't break myself to buy a Lightning to USB or Thunderbolt 3 or whatever they're calling it cable.
I bought
Or
one.
splitter.
I actually
Yeah, I
bought
totally
one.
bought one.
Well,
I probably
I'm
laid out my
technically still
history.
testing this laptop, so I don't know if I'm going to be using it long term. So I don't want to buy a cable I'm not going to use. I'm also
Right.
really, really cheap when I buy stuff for myself. We actually, sitting at work right now, because I didn't go in the office yesterday, are 2 of the LG 5K Thunderbolt 3 monitors.
Ooh,
I
shiny.
think that'll solve some problems. Although I've been using the Acer USB-C 27-inch. It's like a 2K, not a 4K monitor. And really all I plug in is the monitor power and Ethernet adapter. It's not horrible. But I think I was thinking about it organizationally, what are we going to do in all our conference rooms? Are we going to buy 3 dongles per conference room for all?
Yep.
I don't know.
And glue them
Yep.
to every table because they walk off faster than something that walks up very fast.
Right.
AirPlay fixes everything.
Right.
We have one AirPlay room, and we get at least one ticket a month that's like, my computer keeps trying to join this AirPlay, and I don't even know where it is. I've never used it before. All right. I've had a few interesting conversations with people, if we talk about usability, dongleness, or whatever, where I go, okay, so you're really interested in a Touch Bar Pro? Yeah, I want it to be my upgraded laptop. Do you use a keyboard and mouse? Well, yeah, of course. Okay, then when are you ever going to use the Touch Bar?
Yeah.
I can see, for me, I don't use a keyboard and mouse. I use a laptop and a monitor behind it. So for me, I'll actually use the Touch Bar for stuff. But I don't see Apple making a Bluetooth Touch ID keyboard.
I don't think
I
they
just
can.
don't.
I think
Yeah.
in order to have the secure enclave really be secure, and it's got to be tied to an individual machine, which means it's got to be a cabled-in keyboard.
So if you're thinking about it from our desk setup is 2 monitors, a keyboard, a mouse, and a laptop stand, and 90% of the people at your organization use their computers that way, that Touch Bar really isn't going to be utilized that much.
After
I
the
guess-
first week.
Yeah. In meetings, maybe they'll play around with it a little bit. But I don't know. If you have a lot of remote employees that work off of their laptops primarily, I think it makes sense to start purchasing them because they'll probably use the touch bar a lot. I keep wanting to say Touch ID. They're kind of different things. I started using mine a lot more when Spotify actually started having Touch Bar support, which is a few days ago. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can skip tracks from my Touch Bar. This is awesome. Anyway, yeah, we're kind of putting on. Other people can kind of speak to it, especially if you're involved with the purchasing side of what you get at an organization. But we're probably not planning on buying any until Q2. I think until we really feel like applications people use are worth investing in the new hardware. We'll probably just keep buying the 2015 model.
I think we had 10 show up yesterday. A lot of end-of-year purchases at the office.
Yeah.
Burn that budget or it just disappears. Yeah, I get that.
That's or tax
Yeah,
purposes for a
especially-
lot of small businesses here in the DC area.
Especially in education, it's been a real challenge where the cost of the machine has gone up. Interestingly, about the same amount that IBM claimed to save by rolling out Macs rather than PCs. But if that's not bad enough, then when you explain to customers the $500,000 worth of dongles that they need to go with the machine and all of their peripherals that are now not going to attach, the cost to set someone up with one of these machines is a lot more than it used to be.
Yep.
And that is why Apple's doomed. I'm just wrapping up.
Yeah.
And while a dog barks in the background for some reason, totally lost my train of thought. Oh, right. So for us, I think the biggest struggle, I have to go deal with this dog in a second. Not making the Thunderbolt displays anymore. So for us, we not only have to make the decision of, do we want to make a hardware change for the machines that we're deploying to people, but what are we going to do if we need to buy more monitors? Because our company is probably 60% developers, and each of them have 2 cinema displays, like almost across the board. So that's a lot of hardware that's going to be coming up. So we need very quickly. If we don't figure out, do we want to bother buying Thunderbolt? And I don't even work with the older cinema displays that aren't Thunderbolt, that are just DisplayPort. It's a lot of change to deal with at one time. I think, at least from my perspective, there are a lot of considerations you have to make. And all right, I have to go shut up a dog. I'll be right.
Oh, Tom, big yawn, Tom.
Sorry, man. I've been up since very early on the West Coast this morning. My son has not adapted at all to the time change.
He's not aware of such concepts as time changes.
Yeah, time zones are not a thing to Charlie, and that's
No,
just
after
kinda where
midnight,
we're
I'm still on West Coast time normally too.
at.
So it's 4 a.m. rise and shine, huh?
Yeah, well,
More
not
like
quite
4
that
a.m.
early.
go to bed.
It's closer to 5:36, but so he's sleeping in a little bit, but just not all the way. So I feel like we kind of wanted to talk about a highlight, low light from this particular year in terms of what we're expecting, what we thought happened, what we think was the best thing that happened this year, the worst thing that happened this year in the Mac admins world, though, because I mean we're all really sad that Prince died. So I mean I don't want us to have to dwell on that low light, all of us individually. But so I kind of want to go around the room to talk about the highlight of the year and then the low light of the year. Give us both of your opinions here in a quick order. So we'll start with Marcus.
A highlight of the year for me has been the vendor engagement on Slack. Seeing vendors value the community and the input the community can have, and actually being part of that community. It's rather than the community just being admins helping each other out and talking, seeing it spread beyond that, realizing that the vendors are people too, and not these faceless ticketing systems, and deploying software titles. We keep getting back to Microsoft. Deploying Office 2016 has been a lot better for it. Seeing a post put up about a problem with a splash screen, and then an hour later a fix getting released for it. The more of that we can get, I think is going to be a lot better. Low light of the year for me. It's hard to put it down to just one, but at the moment, dongle hell is the one that's killing me. The only thing that's getting me through it is knowing that it's temporary, that it's only a matter of time until vendors release solutions like the iPhone 7 being able to listen to music and charge it at the same time, whether that be on a plane or in my case, in my car. If I want to listen to podcasts and not drain my battery because Bluetooth doesn't work across my speakers, I'd really like someone to make an elegant solution for that. There are solutions out there that involve plugging about 9 different things into each other, but as a former industrial designer, I would really like to see an elegant, well thought out solution. Perhaps someone at Apple might want to look at that, but that would then be an expensive solution.
I have one of those Belkins in my car. And I find that and maybe it's just something with my 1/8" cable, but I find that it charges great, but the audio, I can actually kind of hear a degradation in the audio going through that adapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Random side note. That's not my low point, though.
Yeah.
Back to you.
Yeah. So that's me. Who's next?
Papine, how about you?
I'll keep it topical for myself. Having just changed into a job dealing with a lot more security stuff. Apple kind of stepping up and making it clear that security is a big deal for them, and they are willing to go to bat with the man, so to speak, to keep that way, and also being more open about what they're doing. Them sending Ivan Kristich to Black Hat to talk about exactly, or DEF CON. I was getting mixed up. One of those.
Black Hat, yeah.
Black Hat, sorry, to talk about exactly how things work, what they're planning on, and kind of not being, the vendor with the closed books, but actually saying and showing that they are very serious about this and willing to do what it takes to make that a fact. The fact that most iOS devices, what is the number? I want to say in the high 80s, 90s that are in the latest operating system version, something like that, versus Android where it's in the low 20s. I think speaks for that. They are not only doing the patching and the fixing that's required, but also making sure that it gets out there without too much extra middleman in there. Low light. I don't know. Just a whole bunch of people dying this year. That's not cool, but it happens. But it's sort of like all kind of piled up. That sometimes comes around once every so often when you can't keep up. And that's a shame. So that's my low light.
Emily?
I'm trying to remember things that have happened in the past year. I keep thinking of things that I've just started using in the past year, but I don't think they're that old. I actually think the new hardware change from Apple, the Touch Bar in particular and Touch ID, I think was a highlight for me. I think Touch ID is great, and I like that they're I like that you're seeing some of the things that people really like about iOS ending up on macOS. I think that's fun and exciting. And I like playing with new things. So I'm always excited about new hardware. And outside of Macworld, obviously, the Cubs won a World Series. And I think we may have paid for that with some of the bad things that have happened elsewhere in the universe. But I'm not going to apologize because I don't know if I can express what it's been like being a lifetime Cubs fan. And I'm not even that old. My uncle's 65, and he was telling me about some of the travails of growing up a Cubs fan in the Chicago area. I know there are other people listening who probably can relate to that. I think in terms of a low light, man, them stopping making their own monitors really bums me out. And maybe because I'm so involved in the purchasing aspect I was in my old job and I am here, that it really puts a strain on your provisioning team to figure out what they're going to do going forward. And are we going to be able to stretch old things out? And do we want to stretch old things out? Or do we want to find, it's navigating that kind of gray area between new formats is tricky. And to kind of go back on the dongle health thing, I mean, my boss made the point of yeah, in about a year, maybe 2 years, USB-C, maybe a little longer, depending on how big the uptake is. USB-C will become the norm and it won't be that big of a deal anymore, right? USB-C will be just about everywhere. But right now it sucks because we're not anywhere near there yet. But I guess that's my thoughts on that.
Cool. Charles.
I'm gonna have the same thing for both the high and the low light. So this summer, for the first time in 12 years, I wasn't writing a book. So I got to do things like garden and be human. And the reason I wasn't writing a book is because there was one new checkbox in the latest macOS server version, and only one new checkbox in my mind doesn't warrant writing a whole new book. So I didn't bother. So my low light, only one checkbox. WTF, really? That's kind of weak. I mean, we've all kind of known that the server platform is going a certain direction for a long time anyways. And and that direction might or might not involve an iPad and running on an iPad or not running on an iPad or on anything. But, I didn't have to write a book, so that was nice.
Yeah, that's.
What's the checkbox?
Yeah, I had a summer to myself. Woohoo!
Yeah, which checkbox was new? What was the only new checkbox?
It was in caching, sir.
Yeah.
Oh.
The checkbox was for have Charles write a new book. It was unchecked.
Oh,
But Charles,
sad.
next year, the server is actually going to be an iOS app, so that'll be an interesting book for you.
That's what I was just kind of getting at.
Yeah.
How about you, Tom? What were your high and low lights?
I gotta say, my highlights this year were travel related and going to meet different parts of the community that I'd never met before. I spoke at Macaduck in London. I spoke at Mac DevOps in Vancouver, and Mac Deploy in Calgary. And getting to go outside of the United States and to meet new people in the UK, people who are from the rest of Europe who came to the UK for Macaduck, and all the folks who came to the Pacific Northwest and the Canadian Rockies was an incredible experience. And to step outside of my usual conferences, which have been the MacTechs, the Penn States of the world. And while I love those conferences and they are still near and dear to my heart, to step outside a little bit of that threshold was a real incredible experience. And I definitely want to thank Matt X from Mac DevOps and Anthony Reimer from Mac Deploy and David Ackland from Macaduck for having me this year. And it was an incredible experience. I'm really looking forward to doing Macaduck again in February this year and seeing everybody in person in the UK again. My wife's coming with me this time. We're going to get to make a little bit of a vacation of it.
I get to meet your wife.
You get to meet my wife. She is. It's exciting. She's pretty awesome. I definitely married up, so I know that much is true. I think I share the dongle hell as the low light of the year. I have like a folio that I carry around that has various and sundry adapters and cables in it, tools that I use in my day-to-day job, and I've had to expand that number of dongles and things just because I know I'm going to get asked by a client, hey, do you have a Lightning to USB-C cable? Sure, here, borrow mine. And then it never comes back. And so we just put it on the bill at the end of the month. But to have to keep a running tally of yet another set of adapters is a little bit crazy. Although I do want to put a little props on to the Apple team for differentiating the physical shape of the adapter heads. If you'll notice the adapters themselves, the Thunderbolt adapters are squared off, much like the Thunderbolt 2 port is itself, whereas the USB-C adapters are rounded, and they match port for port. And when I figured that out, I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant. That's so smart. Because then you can reach into your bag and feel for what you need, not necessarily have to look for what you need, because they're all featureless white adapters anyway. So I did spend about $200 in addition to the $3,000 I spent on the new laptop for like all of the adapters this year. And my accountant said that was a good purchase for tax reasons. But I certainly, would have much rather not had to spend that money just to get, a whole bunch of USB A to Cs, USB-C to Lightning, USB-C or Thunderbolt 3 to Thunderbolt 2, and all those things. I just think that's kind of crappy. So I did want to wrap up and thank all of our guests this year. From episodes 1 all the way through episode 18, the community has contributed so much to this podcast as well. So I want to thank Justin Elliott, Gretchen Kurohara, and Dave Test, who joined us in episode 1 to talk about Penn State. Andrew Seago, Miles Lacey, Mikey Paul, who joined us to talk about various and sundry pieces for episode 5. Eric Dreyer, who joined us for episode 6, Rich Troughton and Harold Monaghan, who came to us live from a Starbucks in WWDC in episode 7. Tim Sutton and Patrick Fergus, who joined us for episode 8 to talk about Adobe package changing, as well as Shelley Watson, who joined us for episode 9 to kind of talk about the preparedness mindset. Joel Rennick, who joined us in episode 10 to talk about Nomad. Richard Purvis, who joined us for episode 12 to talk about to talk about smart card security. Michael Lynn, who joined us episode 13 to talk about MDM Mac OS. Ben Toms and covert host Jason Miller, who joined us in episode 13 and a half at JNUC this year, which is a live episode. Recorded live, released later. Greg Nagel, who came to talk about auto package and the trust settings at episode 13 or 14. Tim Sutton, who came back to talk more about auto package 1.0 in episode 16. Clay Cavanis, who joined us from Google to talk about managing at massive scale. And then Eric Gomez from Pinterest, who came to join us in episode 18 for talking about hardware hacking and the future of Mac hardware. Those have been all of our incredible guests. I also want to give a very, very special thanks to Aaron Lippincott, who did incredible work with us, especially during the first 15 episodes of this podcast, making us sound good and making our voices sound better in your ears. So Aaron, thank you so much for making us sound good. I also want to thank our missing co-hosts and Adam Kudiga from Upserve, who couldn't be with us today, as well as Jason Miller, who has joined us once, and we're hopeful to get him again, even though he's been part of this project since the very, very beginning. And so thank you guys very much. Did I miss anything? Do we have other thank yous that we should thank?
Everybody.
Thanks to all of you for joining in. Enjoyed it so far.
We are nothing without our
Thanks to-
listeners.
Dana and Kitsy for their help, and Caleb kind of in the background of the Mac Admin Slack and getting our community started in the first place. That kind of gave us a space to have this dialogue. They're very, very important to me. I love them. Thank you.
They're great people.
Yeah, they're
They
good
are.
people.
We've been trying to record an episode with them.
Yes, and I think that's going to be part of our first 2 months of 2017 if I get my act together.
They're busy people.
So one bonus question as we wrap things up for the day. What's everybody looking forward to in 2017? Charles, I'll start from you.
Getting the last 2 Pokemon.
You only have 2 left to get?
Yeah.
Oh my god! That's bananas. Emily?
I really want to get an Apple Watch. That's kind of my goal for 2017 is to find money to get an Apple Watch. That's so superficial and consumerist of me, but I don't know. I really want to walk around and get more kilometers on my eggs in Pokemon Go. And I think I have a better chance of getting an Apple Watch than a Pokemon Go Plus at this point.
They're more versatile, so good idea.
Yeah, it's multifunction, which I like. I like getting more bang for my buck.
There you go. Marcus?
I'm really looking forward to seeing the changes Apple rings out. So WWDC is going to be a really interesting time. 2016 was a year of big changes for me. Now I'm in a job where I'm spending less time going to meetings and more time actually playing technology. It's going to be an interesting time.
Awesome. Papine?
And what about you, Tom?
Oh, we got to get Papine first, though.
Oh, yes, we do. Sorry, Papine.
Take it easy, Marcus. Jeez.
Yeah.
I gotta speak. I'm joking. I'm just looking forward in this next year or so in a new job and sort of a new position to just learn a lot more and contribute a lot more new stuff back to the community. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to.
Cool. And I guess I'll go last. I'm really looking forward to kind of an inflection point in our business practice. We have been 2 people forever. Since we started 10 years ago. And we've been 2 people when there's been hardly any work, and we've been 2 people when there's been a whole lot of work. I'm hoping that we're going to take the next step in 2017 and grow our practice a little bit. And we'll see how that goes. I'm really interested in kind of how we scale what we offer, because I feel like there's a lot more demand out there than there's ever been. And it's time to start getting the work done. So I'm looking forward to doing the work in 2017, whether that's, I wrote my very first auto package recipe about a week ago, and I just got notified while I was at lunch today that my changes are now part of the public repo. So I'm really excited. My Nomad recipe is the canonical recipe. Please, someone make it better because I'm new at this, and it's been suggested that there are a couple of other ways to make it better. So pull request gratefully accepted. But I'm really looking forward to growing as whatever it is that I am. I'm part consultant, part sysadmin, sitting someplace in the middle. So looking forward to that. So thanks, everybody.
Consysadmin.
Yeah,
Sorry.
a consysadmin. I like that. Oh, hey, something is ringing in here, and I'm not sure what it is.
That is the best way to end an episode ever.
Yeah.
Time's up. Time to say bye.
Time's up. We're ready to go. So, happy New Year, everybody. We're really looking forward to spending 2017 with y'all. You'll be able to find us at podcast.macadmins.org. We will have both audio and video versions in the show notes, which will be up sometime between now and the first of the year, I'm guessing, at this point, judging by the amount of time left between now and then. It is, as always, wonderful to hear from you guys. Please email us at podcast@macadmins.org. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. If you want to sponsor the podcast, please reach out to there, and we will be accepting real sponsors, not just Yucky Brand Unix script sponsors in 2017. Even though Yucky Brand Unix scripts is a whole hell of a lot of fun to do.
We love Yucky Brand Unix scripts.
Yes, it's pretty wonderful. So yeah, Happy New Year, everybody, and we'll see you guys real soon. Everybody say goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
See you later.
Happy
Happy
New
New
Year.
Year.